We're in Ephesians chapter 4. As usual, every week I set context, and you guys by now should know what the context is. Ephesians 4:1, live a life worthy of your calling. We have a calling from God. Now he's talking about practical application about how do you live that life worthy of the calling. Then in 17 through 24 of chapter 4 of Ephesians, he says, here's how you do it. You put off things of the old life and you put on things of the new life. And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about putting off and putting on. And now he's going to go through this laundry list of very specific things we are to put off and put on. And last week, we talked about lying. We put off lying. We put on telling the truth. Well, today, we're going to talk about the next thing he addresses, and that is anger. And so I'm going to go ahead and read Ephesians chapter 4. Beginning in verse 26. And don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, and don't give the devil a foothold. So there's really three commands, more or less, that he says here when it comes to anger. Now, I want to go ahead and jump down to verse 30. And read 30 and 31 and 32 because they actually apply to anger as well because you're putting off anger, but he's going to tell us some things to put on. He says, and do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God by the way you live. Remember, he has identified you as his own, guaranteeing that you will be saved on the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander. See, there's the get rid of. Hear all that? That's all tied to anger. As well as all types of evil behavior. Think about all the evil behavior that's tied to anger. Think about how many evil things, revengeful things, lies that are told, murder, abuse, gossip, that's all tied with anger as the motive. And so what he says here is he says that bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, all that anger, that also leads to what? All types of evil behavior. And he's saying you just need to get rid of all that. Instead, be kind to each other. So this is what we're going to be putting on instead of anger. Kindness, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. So there is our put off, put on for the day. So this is going to be a very, very simple conversation today because none of us have problems with anger. Right? So a couple of things in way of introduction. One, you need to know this. The Bible never says anger is a sin. Okay? So anger is not a sin. But anger is an emotion that can quickly lead to sin. And so the warnings in the Bible about anger are not, don't get angry because anger is wrong. It is control your anger. But notice I didn't say in the title of this, don't get angry. I said control your anger because anger is a switch that leads to all sorts of evil behavior. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is this. Every person has what's called a default emotion. And what a default emotion is when I don't know what to feel, what do I feel? Okay? Some psychologists talk about you have emotions and then you have emotions under your emotions. Why do you feel what you feel? So when it comes to anger, here's what you have to know. When a woman doesn't know what to feel, this is broad generalization, you can find an exception. Usually, it's sadness when she doesn't know what to feel. When a man doesn't know what to feel, his default emotion usually is anger. And so here's what I've noticed in my life. When things are going along and I don't know why and I don't know what to feel, I just get angry. I just get mad at life. You ever been angry at life and you don't even know why? It's because it's your default emotion. When you don't know what to feel, that's what you're feeling. Have you ever seen a movie called Inside Out? It's a Disney movie. Okay, first of all, especially for the cameras, those of you who don't know me, I don't watch Disney movies and animated movies very often, okay? That's not my thing. However, I do have kids and grandkids and other children running around that I go take to see the movie. And I went and saw Inside Out. It's a Disney animated movie about emotions. And I'm telling you what, it is not a children's movie, although the kids are enamored by all the cartoons. It is an adult movie, and it's as deep a movie as you'll ever go see about your emotions. But what was interesting is there's a mom and a dad and a child, a girl, and they all had these emotions that were played by characters, but they had one predominant emotion that ran the show for each one of them. And it was so interesting because in the mother's little room of all her emotions, sadness was the leader, and in the dad's, anger was the leader. And I'm like, whoever did the research for this movie really did their research well, because they saw that the emotion that drives a man is anger. And so men more than women, I'm not saying women don't have a problem with anger, but we really need to deal with this emotion and address this issue if we're going to be men of God. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to begin with a definition. And so I want you to look under anger defined. Anger is the result of unmet expectations. Now, I just want you to think about that. Anger is the result of unmet expectations. Sometimes when I'm counseling people and they're angry, I say, one of the best things you can do is change your expectations. If you're angry with your wife because she won't have sex with you every day, maybe you should have an expectation she's going to give you sex once every other week. Right? You change your expectations, you might find that your anger subsides. Because anger is about unmet expectation. Anger says, you owe me. There's something in the expectations of my life, of my relationship, of something going on where you didn't meet the expectation, and because you didn't meet the expectation in my life, I think you owe me. And if you owe me, I'm mad. Okay? We get angry when we don't get what we want or think what we deserve. Okay? So behind anger usually is a sense of entitlement. I deserve something from you that I didn't get. And because I didn't get it, I'm mad. However, there's a positive side of anger, right? Anger can also come when we see injustice or unfairness in the world. Our expectations for how the world should function are unmet. See, it's still unmet expectations, right? So should we get angry when we see some of the plight of the things going on around the world today? Should we get angry when girls are exploited in sex trafficking? Absolutely. Should we get angry when foster kids are dumped out of the system at 18 and left on the streets? Absolutely. There's injustices of the world. We have expectations for how the world should function, and when it doesn't function that way, there's some righteous anger that comes up within us, right? And there's nothing wrong with that righteous anger, but what's the warning? Watch out. Watch out. That anger is very, very easy to go into evil behavior. And so there's always this warning that comes with it. Think about Jesus. Did Jesus ever get angry? Absolutely. He got angry one day, went in the temple, dumped all of the tables, and said what? My expectation is this is going to be a house of prayer, and you guys have turned it into a marketplace making a profit for your businesses. Unmet expectation, he got angry, and he did something about it. Our call as men of God is not to ever be angry. Our call as men of God is understand when anger is unrighteous or righteous, and when it is righteous, to stand up and make changes in the world for the good. Now, do people ever get unrighteously angry? Righteously angry, but do something bad about it? Yeah. Remember a few years ago, the bombing of abortion clinics? Those were people who had righteous anger, but they handled it the wrong way. Right? So the first thing I have to do when I get mad is I have to say, am I mad because I have an unmet expectation because I'm selfish? Usually. Or do I have an unmet expectation that's more righteous because the world isn't as it should be? And I've got to tell you right now, and this is just confession time, I'm mad a lot right now. I'm mad a lot. And I'm telling you, it is a part of a grieving process for our country. And I am so ready for I think in the second week of November, no matter how the election turns out, I think my anger is going to go down about 4 notches. But here's what I find. Here's the problem with anger. Free-floating anger, what does it cause us to do? Less patient and lash out at the people that are closest to us, right? And I find myself not having a whole lot of patience right now because there's that anger underneath everything because I know what the next 3 months are going to be like. and I just, boy, I want to turn off the radio and turn off the television and go to New Zealand for a 3-month vacation or something, you know. So it's that anger. But here's what I want you to know. Let's go back to selfish anger. Selfish anger needs to be addressed at the source. Anger is called a secondary emotion, and we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. So anger needs to be addressed at the source. I don't address the anger, I address what's causing the anger. And if I'll address what's causing the anger, where does the anger go? Goes away. It subsides, right? So what happens too many times, and this is why society fails us. You know what anger management courses teach you? You know, you have these guys that are angry, they can't control their temper. You know what they teach them? Okay, stop and hold your breath and count to 5. What are they trying to address? The symptom, the anger. Does it ever work? No, because what made me angry in the first place is still there. So I can hold my breath for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or 30 seconds, and when I finally breathe again, I'm still ready to punch in the wall, right? Because you have to address the anger as the source. Anger is progressive in nature. It gets worse if it is not addressed at the core. Anger is never the issue. Anger is the response of the flesh to the real issue. Do you hear that? Now, here's what I want you to know. And this is in your notes a little bit later on, but I want to address this right now while we're talking about it. If you don't address your anger, it will lead to resentment. If you don't address your resentment, it will lead to bitterness. Anger, resentment, bitterness. How do I deal with anger? At the source. I've got to go to the source. Okay? So, I want to read a couple of verses to you, and then we're going to go into our groups, and there's going to be some questions come up on the screen for us to discuss. A couple of Proverbs. Proverbs 14:17. Short-tempered people do foolish things. Who agrees with that? Anybody ever done something foolish in your anger? Absolutely. And then 29. Proverbs 29:11. Fools vent their anger, but the wise quietly hold it back. Fools vent their anger. Verse 22, an angry person starts fights. A hot-tempered person commits all kinds of sins. And so if we're going to address anger, we've got to address the issue behind the anger. We're going to get into that in just a moment. But what I want to do is I want to stop right here, and I want you to just discuss kind of the introduction and the definition here that we have of anger. What I'm about to give you is pure gold. Are you ready? It's pure gold. This is good stuff. So just hang on, because I'm going to open your eyes to a couple things. Okay, so let's look back at Paul's advice. Paul says, don't let the anger control you. I'm sorry, let me start all over. Don't sin by letting anger control you. Okay, so you can't let it control you. He says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. What does he mean by that? You need to address it. You need to address it. I've got a rule in my life. Always address anger the day it happens. So when my wife and I get into a fight, we never address the issue while we're still angry. Why? Yeah, you personalize. You start saying things that you don't mean, right? Because now it's she versus her versus me, right? And we're fighting back and forth. So we never do that. What we do is we say, stop. You go deal with your anger, I'll go deal with my anger, but before we go to bed tonight, we're going to come back and address the issue, because it's the issue underlying the anger that makes the anger go away, right? So I address the anger, okay, I calm down, I'm not going to call her names, I'm not going to say things I regret, and I can't tell you how many times at 9 o'clock at night we sit down and say, okay, now we're going to address this and we're going to get it done before the sun goes down. I'll tell you why that's important here in just a moment. And then his third piece of advice is, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. Just remember, the devil is right around the corner in anger. He's just right there waiting, and he will trap you if you're not careful. Okay, so Here's what psychologists say about anger. They say there's 3 ways to handle anger. Number 1 is repress it. Repress it. Here's what I mean by that. This is the most unhealthy way you can address anger, okay? But I want you to know that this occurs all the time in religion. And it goes something like this. Sweet Christian people don't get angry, and we don't yell and scream, so what do? We repress it. We push the anger down and we smile and pretend everything's okay and God's on the throne and all is good. And that's the worst thing you can ever do for anger. Because here's what happens. I stuff it and I stuff it and I stuff it, but I never deal with the issues going on in my relationships. I never deal with the issues in my life that are making me angry. I don't address my wife. I don't address my kids. I don't address my friends. I don't address my business problems. And what happened to those problems when you don't address them? They get bigger, and they get bigger, and they get bigger. And what happens to my anger? It goes from anger to resentment to bitterness. And suddenly I have a bitter heart. And what happens in resentment, anger is directed toward one person. I'm mad at Larry. Resentment is free-floating anger. I'm angry at everybody. Right? And then bitterness is just simply, I'm just mad at the world. And if we don't address it, it just stays in there. But what happens to that anger? It's boiling, right? It's like, do you ever make oatmeal in the morning and you go away to do something and you forget and it boils over? Okay, that's what happens in your life because you can't keep it repressed forever. But we use this Christianese to say, okay, we got to be nice to each other, so it just boils and boils and boils, and then all of a sudden, what does it do? It boils over. And when it boils over, we really, really hurt the people. What's going to hurt my wife more? Me dealing with things as they come up and saying, you know what, let's address the anger separately and come back and deal with the issue tonight? Or is it going to be to wait until I have 15 things and blow up in her face and scream at her about all 15? Which is healthier, right? Repression is the worst thing you can do. That's the worst way you can handle anger. And yet it's the most prevalent in Christianity because of this crazy notion that good Christians don't get angry. Right? Good Christians get angry. We just handle it in a healthy way. Okay, are we clear on that? Okay. So, the second one is express it. Let the anger run free. Boy, just let the anger go. Just let them have it. Give into your anger. Let it all out and you'll feel better. Here's the problem. Anger is surprisingly like addictions. The more you give into it, the stronger it gets. And the more it controls. Remember what was the first piece of advice Paul gave us? Don't let anger control you. But if you are always letting it out, the more you let it out, the more you want to let it out. And the better it feels, and the more you want to let it out. And there's almost a high that comes with, boy, I feel better now that I just got that out. Now, I bloodied everyone around me, right? And I've been through 3 divorces, and I can't keep a girlfriend, right? And I don't have any friends, and I get fired about every year and a half because of my mouth. But boy, do I feel great about my anger. I have no repressed anger in my life. And so we express it. We express it. And think about 31. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, slander. Think about it. What follows unrepressed anger? When we just express it, when we just leave it out there, abuse, violence, broken relationships, words that you wish you'd never said, divorce, lying, gossip. It just leads to relational deterioration, just failure all the way around, right? And yet, I'm going to tell you, 95% of the people I know either repress it or express it. They're either angry all the time and they're blowing up at everybody, or they're trying to play the Christian game where we can't be mad because we're good Christian boys. And they're both absolutely death to your soul. So now are you ready for the way to handle it? You confess it. Let me tell you what I mean by confess it. You get it out in the open and you address the core issues behind your anger. Now, I told you I was going to give you some gold today. Are you ready? Here it is. In anger, anger is a secondary emotion. Underneath anger is always one of these three things: hurt, frustration, or fear. Now remember, the key to the anger is what? Unmet expectations. Surrounding unmet expectations are these three things. I have unmet expectations. You hurt me because of those unmet expectations. Or I'm very frustrated with you because of unmet expectations. Or I'm very fearful because of what is going to happen as a result of those unmet expectations. So I'm angry. You got to stop and you got to ask the question, why am I angry? Why am I? Who am I angry at? And why am I angry? What is underneath that? What is the expectation that's not being met in my life? And so you literally, and guys, I'm telling you, literally, this will change your life. Keep this with you. What hurt me? Well, my wife hurt me because I had an expectation that ABC was going to happen, and it didn't happen. And she hurt me when she did that, because she had made me that promise, and I thought she was going to deliver on that promise, and she didn't deliver on that promise. Why do we get angry at our kids? Usually it's because they hurt us, right? They lie to us. They make promises they don't keep. Our kids, nothing can hurt your heart like your kids, and nothing can make you angry like your kids, right? So hurt, frustration. Sometimes I just get frustrated at things in life. I get frustrated at my wife. I get frustrated at work. I get frustrated at you people. You know, you just get frustrated. Why am I frustrated? I got to answer that question. What is frustrating me? It has something to do with unmet expectations. Is it about, I thought the world was going to turn out this way and it turned out that way. I thought my relationship with Brian was going to go one way, and then, boy, he threw a wrench in it, and I'm frustrated with him because I had an expectation that didn't get fulfilled. I'm frustrated about that. And then the big one is fear. And men, we don't like to deal with fear. But it's fear. What am I afraid of? It usually has something to do with I'm afraid of failure, or I'm afraid of being rejected. I can't tell you how many men have a fear of rejection by a woman, and it's always under the surface. They don't know what's going on, but they have a quick temper, and as soon as they feel like she could possibly reject them, they blow up and reject her, so they never have to say, I was rejected. Anybody know where we're going here? Anybody know what we're talking about? Can that happen at work? Fear of failure. See, I watch people surround themselves with people that won't let them succeed, so they can blame those people, so they never have to address the fact that they failed. Well, of course I failed. I mean, look, if you're hanging out with Rick, how can you not fail?
I second that motion.
You guys understand what I'm talking about? And so we have this fear of failure and fear of abandonment or rejection. And those two fears drive us if we're not careful. And so I set myself up. I never really want to be rejected or abandoned, and I never really want to fail. And so I'll set myself up so that I can either reject first or blame the failure on someone else. That way I don't have to take personal responsibility. And what does it come out in? Anger. Anger. And anger is like water. Anger funnels down to the path of least resistance. So if I'm angry, I might be angry at Rick, but Rick might be my boss. So can I really say anything to Rick? So who do I have to take it out on? The safest people in my life. The people who love me the most. And that's who I take it out on. And is that fair to them? Absolutely not. And so all of a sudden, I've been doing this pattern for 15 years, and I absolutely love my wife, and I can't figure out why I'm going through a divorce, but I am. Well, it's because for 15 years, I never confessed my anger and got down to the core issues under the anger: hurt, frustration, and fear. And I kept giving it to her because I couldn't give it to my boss, and I couldn't give it to the president, and I couldn't give it to whoever else it is, and so I gave it to who I could. But here's what happens. Here's the amazing thing about anger. When I finally get down and deal with the hurt, frustration, and fear, the anger dissipates. The anger dissipates. I can't tell you how many times I've been mad at my wife, mad enough to just knock her head off. But when I sat down with her and began to address the hurt, the frustration, or the fear, and I actually took the time to listen to her side, the anger just, it's gone. Because we addressed the issue. Part of being a man is leading your family. Part of leading your family is standing up and addressing the issues nobody else wants to address. And if we don't, the result is anger that leads to this in your family that leads to separation. So you can do yourself a whole lot of favors by coming right back down here to hurt, frustration, and fear. When I'm mad at my wife and I talk to her, I demean her, I call her names. It's about her. She's not the issue, the problem is the issue. If I'll take 3 hours and just say, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you right now because I don't want to knock your head off emotionally, and I calm down and I ask myself the question, not her, myself the question, what's hurting me? What's frustrating me? What am I scared of? And I begin to see it and go, oh, that's what's going on. Then I can come back with her and I start and say, now, give me your perspective. I don't say a word. Give me your perspective. She gives me her perspective. I've already dealt with hurt, frustration, and fear, and I say, sweetheart, here's what I think is going on. I know from my end, here's what's frustrating me. I had this expectation. It didn't get met. That was very frustrating for me. And that's my feeling. And feeling doesn't mean it was right, but it certainly means that's how I felt. Now you can have a dialogue about the issue and resolve it. Does that make sense to you? Okay. This is gold. Did I tell you it was gold? Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop, and we're going to discuss the ways that people respond to anger, and we're going to talk about these 3: hurt, frustration, and fear in your groups, and there will be up on your screen some questions as well. So let's stop and talk about this for a while. Let me wrap this up quickly because I want to give you some time at the end to discuss all of this in the big picture around your groups. Now, let me go back and clarify something we talked about earlier. When it comes to fighting with your wife, I'm going to use wife, although it can apply to children, it can apply to anyone. You want to have a conversation when there's not a fight on the line. Okay? Take your wife out to dinner some night or sit down and just say, I want to create a healthier way to handle conflict in our marriage. Okay? Now, psychologists tell us that the single worst thing you can do in a marriage, are you ready? It will almost guarantee divorce, is stonewalling. You know what stonewalling is? Done with you, not talking to you, ignoring you, pretend you don't exist. That's the worst thing you can ever do to another human being. Okay? So, what you have to do, but so many of us are conflict avoidance, and so here's what we want to do. I'm not going to address this right now. I'm going to go away, and in 2 or 3 hours, I'm going to feel a little better, so now I don't want to address the issue because I feel a little better. And so then you never address anything, okay? So you need to sit down with your wife. There's no fighting on the line. Say, here's what we're going to do. I don't like to lose my temper. I don't like to scream at you. I don't want to hurt you. So here's what we're going to do. When we get in a fight and it gets heated, either one of us have the right to call a timeout. And what the timeout means is it's too heated and it's about to turn personal and we're about to hurt each other. And that timeout is a 2 or a 3 hour timeout for us to calm down. And then we'll come back later on in the afternoon or in the evening. And for us, it's always, like I said, about 9 o'clock at night before we go to bed. And we're going to address the issue. Now, we're going to hold each other accountable to addressing the issue. And we're also going to hold each other accountable to that 6 or 7 hours that we're not dealing with this, or 2 or 3 or whatever it is. We're going to calm down. We're going to get our anger under control so when we come back, we don't lose our temper again. And we promise, we'll never stonewall. I'll never ignore you and pretend you don't exist. Okay? So does that help you a little bit? That's kind of a healthy way to deal with that. Now, let's talk about the last thing. 4:32, instead be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving each other. The key to addressing anger and dealing with anger is forgiveness. Because I want you to think about it. What do you say when you're angry? You owe me. It's unmet expectations. You owe me. What is forgiveness? I'm canceling the debt. I'm canceling the debt. Whatever you owed me, you don't owe me anymore. Whatever that expectation was, I changed that expectation. That's forgiveness. I let it go.
And you have to forgive yourself too.
Oh yeah, you have to forgive yourself, and you have to forgive that other person. You're going to release it, and you're going to release them. Okay, so I want you to notice a couple things in your note here. Forgiveness is the decision to cancel the debt. Okay, forgiveness is not an emotion. Forgiveness is a decision to cancel the debt. It doesn't mean that the offense didn't happen. It doesn't mean the offense didn't matter. It doesn't mean the offense didn't hurt. What it means is that I turn this issue and you over to God, and God will deal with you. I will let it go. And I'll let you go. And when I cancel the debt, I release the desire for revenge. And when I release the desire for revenge, I address that issue and the anger will go away. I release the desire for revenge. Think about how strong the desire for revenge is. Think about it. It is so strong, right? Think about all the movies. The movies are about two things, sex or revenge. That's what the movies are about, right? And how everybody wants to get revenge, right? It's so strong in us. Forgiveness says, I really want to get you back for what you did to me because you really made me mad and I have an unmet expectation and I'm angry. But I'm going to give in to that. I'm not going to give. I'm going to release it. I'm going to let you go. How do you do that? That's the big question. How do you do that? Prayer, giving it over to God, releasing it to God. Forgiveness is saying, God, I trust you that you can take care of that person and you can address the issue with that person, so I don't have to. I don't have to. I don't have to get you back. I don't have to get revenge. God, you are my protector. You will do that for me. Okay? So then you can, well, how do you do that? Well, I'll tell you how you do that. And the only thing I know to do is to tell you about how my wife forgave me when I had the affair. And needless to say, do you think she was a little angry? You think she had a little hurt, a little frustration, a little fear going on in her life? And she walked through the process of forgiving me. And I asked her, I said, how did you do it? And she says, I was in my quiet time one morning. And I said, God, how can I ever forgive this man for what he's done to me? And God just spoke back and said, daughter, how can you not forgive him after everything I've forgiven you for? When you come to a place that you recognize everything God has forgiven me for that I didn't deserve, and who are we as Christian men? We're just mirrors that are mirroring the character and image of God to other people. How can I not forgive after what God has forgiven me for? How can I not forgive? So when I'm stuck and I'm having a hard time forgiving and letting go, well, I'm addressing the issue. That helps the anger go away. But what am I also doing? I'm also going back to the Father saying, Father, reveal to me how much you've had to forgive me so it'll make it easier for me to forgive them. And when you walk in forgiveness and you're able to keep that clean and you're addressing the core issues underneath the anger, you're addressing what is it that was an unmet expectation, hurt, frustration, and fear. When you're addressing those things, then what happens with anger is, does it mean you don't ever get angry? Of course not. But what it means is when you get it, you have a system of knowing how to address the anger so the anger doesn't control you and the anger doesn't live Satan a foothold into your life. And so that's how you control and address anger. So on the video, last set of questions is coming up for you guys. You got about 10, 15 minutes left. So just talk about this whole issue around the table. I really hope this was helpful for you today. I hope this helped you. Let's close out with a prayer, this part, and then you guys can discuss for a few more minutes. Father, thank you for our time together this morning. And I just pray this material was practical for these guys and for those who are watching on the video. And Lord, I pray that you will give us a heart of forgiveness and give us honesty and integrity in our hearts where we can deal honestly with the hurt, frustration, and fear that come out of the unmet expectations in our relationships. In Christ's name, amen.